This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. When we talk about melodies, we're usually focusing on the specific notes. That's what gives your melody its shape, after all, and it's a big part of the emotional feel of the song. But what you play isn't the only thing that matters. It's also important to look at how you play it. The same notes can come across very differently depending on how you articulate them. Probably the most well-known articulations are the ones relating to note length. For instance, take this melody. We're just playing everything for as long as the notation says we're supposed to. This is called tenuto, and it's fine, but compare it to this. That's staccato, and it's a lot bouncier. Technically, staccato means you're supposed to play the note for half its duration, then rest for the other half, but it's often just used to describe any short, disconnected notes. On the other end, we have legato, which means the notes flow into each other. This is also called a slur, and how it sounds depends on the instrument you're playing. On something like a flute, where you can easily move from note to note, legato means that you play the phrase in one uninterrupted sound. On a piano, though, that's not possible. Each new note you play requires a new attack because each note is created by a different string. This makes true legato impossible on a piano, but skilled players may be able to manipulate their playing, carefully staggering their strikes and releases to create a similar effect. They might even vary the volume at which they play each note in order to create the illusion of a smoothly decaying sound. Speaking of volume, another common kind of articulation is based on how hard you play the note. Now, I'm not talking about the volume of a whole section here. That's dynamics, which is a slightly different thing. I'm talking about changing volume for a specific note. The simplest example is what's called the accent, where you just play a little bit harder than the surrounding melody. A similar tool is the sforzando, which is like an especially strong accent. There's also some more advanced techniques like marcato, meaning marked, which is basically a combination of an accent and staccato. Marcato can also be applied to whole sections, where it tends to mean that each note should be accented with strong initial attacks, kind of like the opposite of legato. And then there's my favorite dynamic articulation, the Forte Piano, which literally means loud to soft. Here you start with a strong attack, then quickly drop down to a much quieter level. It's almost like staccato, but with a tail. A common variation of this, especially in horn sections, is to drop down, then slowly ramp back up to your original volume. This technique lets you create the feeling of a crescendo even in a section that's already really loud. You can even sort of do it on an electric keyboard with some clever use of the volume knob. You may have noticed that which instrument you're playing or writing for has a huge effect on which articulations you have available. Every instrument is different and each one presents you with different options on how to make noise with it. For instance, I know many of you are probably guitar players, but for those who aren't, it might surprise you to learn that there's actually a difference between picking downward and picking upward. This is hard to demonstrate with digital instruments, so I'll leave it to your imagination, but because of the way your muscles work, downstrokes tend to be stronger and more powerful, while upstrokes are a bit lighter and bouncier. This effect is amplified when you're playing multiple notes at once because you tend to hit the first couple strings hardest, so downstroke chords accent the lower notes while upstroke chords sound higher and brighter. You can even see this by genre. Punk guitarists often play exclusively down, whereas reggae is usually up. Another thing that can change the sound of a guitar is whether you're using a pick or just your fingers. Picks are hard and rigid, so they produce clear, strong attacks, whereas the pads of your fingers are softer, so notes plucked with them sound a bit more muted. But the biggest question of all is to pick or not to pick. That is, for any given note, do you actually do anything with your strumming hand? Because you don't necessarily have to. Guitarists can use tricks like hammer-ons, pull-offs, and trills to help them play multiple notes with one pluck of a string like the legato playing from earlier, although with a somewhat limited range. There's even a technique called tapping where you just hit the frets hard enough to initiate a sound without actually plucking the string at all. Horn players, meanwhile, get most of their articulation options from their tongues. This is how they block or let through air in order to create notes, and the precise movements of the tongue are what creates the specific sound of the instrument. This is often taught by comparison to spoken syllables. For instance, ta creates a strong, clear attack, whereas da is a little softer and la is softer still, almost like a full legato. At fast tempos, you might have to start double tonguing, where you combine two syllables like taka so that your tongue creates new notes in both directions. You can even create a sort of distortion effect by flutter tonguing, which is pretty much what it sounds like. Quickly fluttering your tongue like it sounds better through a wind instrument. But my absolute favorite playing technique comes from the violin. Over the centuries, composers have experimented with pretty much every imaginable way of making sound with a violin, from bowing at different points on the instrument to plucking the strings in what's called pizzicato, but forget all that. Let's talk about col legno. Literally translated as with wood, this means turning the bow around and just hitting the strings with a wooden part. That sounds dangerous, but if you do it gently, it's not actually bad for the instrument, and it creates a muted percussive sound that adds a weird, unpredictable overtone, so multiple violins doing this at once sounds really chaotic. Plus, it basically turns the violin into a drum, and That's awesome. Speaking of awesome, do you like learning things? If you're watching my videos, I'm gonna assume you do, and if so, you should probably check out this video's sponsor, Skillshare. They're offering 2 free months of premium membership to the first 100 people to visit this URL, which I've also linked in the description, so if you've been meaning to give them a try, why not do it now? You can also just use the promo code YT12tone if that seems easier. For those of you who don't know, Skillshare is an education platform with over 17,000 classes from experts on how to do basically anything. They've got some really cool music production classes, but honestly, I've mostly been checking out their cooking section, with lessons on making the perfect grilled cheese, ice cream, dumplings, and even homemade marshmallows, which I had no idea was a thing you could do, but now I know how thanks to Skillshare. But that's just what I've been doing with it. Skillshare's premium membership offers unlimited access to all their classes, so whether you're interested in graphic design, data science, gaming, or whatever else, you can get all those lessons for less than $10 a month with an annual membership. Plus, again, 2 free months with a link in the description. You should probably just click that. Go on, just click it's down there. You know what? You know how links work. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you want to help make these videos possible, please consider supporting 12tone on Patreon or checking out our store. You can also join our mailing list to find out about new episodes, like, share, comment, subscribe, and keep on rockin'.